Mike Johnson thought he could ignore the Constitution, and nobody would stop him. He blocked a duly elected congresswoman from taking her seat for 36 days, the longest delay in modern history. He denied 813,000 Arizona voters their representation to protect political interests and hide connections to the Epstein files. Then Jasmine Crockett stood up in a congressional hearing with a folder marked, "Constitutional Violations, Johnson versus Democracy." What happened in the next 49 minutes made Republicans turn on their own speaker, forced 3 constitutional scholars to condemn him on national TV, and triggered an emergency court order. The double standard that couldn't be explained: 2 Republicans sworn in within 24 hours, 1 Democrat blocked for 36 days. The Epstein files connection he couldn't deny. The Arizona mother who testified about her daughter dying without congressional help. The 18 seconds of silence when asked, "Why is her vote the one you fear?" A federal judge watching live. Democratic members walking out in protest. And the constitutional scholar who said on camera, "This is how democracies die, 1 blocked vote at a time." This is how a black woman congresswoman from Texas defended an Arizona Latina's right to serve and exposed a speaker willing to break democracy to protect powerful men. The House Judiciary Committee hearing room felt different that morning. The usual empty gallery seats were packed. Reporters shoulder to shoulder. Arizona constituents who'd traveled across the country. Constitutional law professors who'd cleared their schedules. And 22 cameras from every major network. This wasn't supposed to be a major hearing. Emergency procedural hearings rarely drew attention. But this one was different. Chairman Jim Jordan stood at his gavel, looking uncomfortable in a way he rarely did. He was used to being the attack dog, the one asking hostile questions, the one making Democrats squirm. Today, he was presiding over a hearing that would make his own party uncomfortable. "The committee will come to order," he said, the gavel crack echoing in the packed room. "We are here for an emergency hearing on constitutional procedures regarding the seating of special election winners. I want to emphasize that this is a procedural matter and should be treated with the seriousness it deserves." He was already playing defense, trying to lower the temperature before things got hot. It wouldn't work. "We have several witnesses today," Jordan continued. Speaker Mike Johnson, who will address questions about House precedent and procedures, Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva of Arizona, who is at the center of this situation, and several expert witnesses on constitutional law and congressional procedure. 22 million people were watching live. PBS had preempted regular programming. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all carrying it live, because everyone knew what this was really about. Mike Johnson entered first, flanked by 2 legal advisors. He looked confident, the confidence of a man who'd spent his career as a lawyer, who knew how to frame arguments, who understood that in politics, narrative often mattered more than facts. He wore a dark suit, red tie, and carried his Bible, his trademark. He set it on the table in front of him with deliberate care, a visual reminder to anyone watching, "I'm a man of faith. I'm a man of principle." He settled into the witness chair with the ease of someone who'd done this before, who believed he could handle whatever questions came his way. Then Adelita Grijalva entered. She walked with purpose, but you could see the exhaustion. 36 days of fighting for the basic right to do the job voters had elected her to do, 36 days of having keys to an office but no staff, no email, no power to help the constituents who needed her. She was 41, the daughter of the late Representative Raul Grijalva, who'd held Arizona's 7th district for over 20 years until his death from lung cancer in March. She'd won the special election with 69% of the vote, not a narrow victory, a landslide, a mandate. But she couldn't serve because one man wouldn't let her. She sat at the witness table, hands folded, expression neutral, but eyes showing everything: frustration, anger, determination. The Democratic members of the committee entered together, a show of solidarity. And at the end, moving to her seat with a black portfolio in hand, was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas. She didn't look at Johnson, didn't acknowledge him, just sat down, placed the portfolio on the desk in front of her, and waited. Jordan cleared his throat. "Speaker Johnson, you've submitted written testimony. Would you like to present it to the committee?" Johnson leaned toward the microphone. His Louisiana accent was slight but present, carefully maintained, not too strong to seem regional, not too polished to seem elite. "Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to address what I believe are unfounded accusations that have been made regarding my handling of Representative-elect Grijalva's swearing-in. He shuffled his papers, a gesture of casual confidence. Let me be very clear from the outset. I have not violated anyone's constitutional rights. I have not engaged in any form of political gamesmanship. I have simply followed established House precedent for handling special election winners. He looked directly at the cameras, addressing America, not just the committee. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi set a precedent during her tenure. When Republicans won special elections, she waited until the House returned to full legislative session before administering the oath. She did not swear in members during pro forma sessions or recesses. I am following that exact same precedent. Ranking Member Jamie Raskin interrupted. Mr. Speaker, with respect, that's not accurate. Speaker Pelosi, I'm not finished, Johnson said firmly. I will address questions when I'm done with my statement. Jordan nodded. The witness will be allowed to complete his statement. Johnson continued. The government shutdown that began on October 1 made it impossible to conduct a proper swearing-in ceremony. We want Representative-elect Grijalva to have the full dignity and pomp and circumstance that the office deserves, not some rushed procedure during a crisis. He paused for effect. Additionally, I find it deeply offensive that some have suggested, and I want to be very careful with my words here, because these are serious accusations, that I would delay the seating of a duly elected representative for political reasons, that I would deny representation to over 800,000 Americans because of some petition or political calculation. His voice took on an edge of righteous indignation. I am a Christian man. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in democracy. And I deeply resent, the implication that I would violate my oath of office or my principles for any political advantage. He leaned back. When the House returns to full legislative session, I will administer the oath to Representative-elect Grijalva with the full honor she deserves. Until then, I am following precedent and procedure. That's my statement. The room buzzed with murmurs. Some Republicans nodded approvingly. Democrats looked skeptical. Grijalva's expression hadn't changed, but her hands had tightened into fists. Jordan recognized several Republican members first, who lobbed softball questions about precedent and procedure. Johnson answered smoothly, repeatedly emphasizing his adherence to established norms and his respect for constitutional processes. Then Democratic members got their turns. Each asked pointed questions. Each got deflections about precedent, procedure, the shutdown, the need for proper ceremony. Representative Eric Swalwell, Mr. Speaker, you say you're following precedent, but didn't you swear in Representatives Patronis and Fine within 24 hours of their special elections earlier this year? Johnson, those situations were different. They had time-sensitive constituent matters that required immediate attention. Swalwell, what matters? Johnson, I don't recall the specific details, but their requests were deemed urgent by my staff. Representative Dan Goldman, deemed urgent by your staff. Isn't denying 813,000 Americans their representation for over a month also urgent? Johnson, Congressman, I understand you're trying to create a narrative here, but the facts are simple. I'm following the same procedures Speaker Pelosi used. If you had a problem with it then, where were your objections? It went on like this for 40 minutes, questions and deflections, accusations and denials, building frustration, but no breakthrough. Then Chairman Jordan said the words that changed everything. The chair recognizes the gentle lady from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes. Jasmine Crockett looked up from her notes. She'd been silent through the entire hearing, just watching, listening, waiting. Several Democrats had offered to yield time to her, giving her additional minutes. She declined. 5 minutes would be enough. She opened the black portfolio with a deliberate motion. The sound of papers rustling filled the room as reporters leaned forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Her voice was calm, measured, the tone of a prosecutor who already knew how the case would end. Speaker Johnson, I'm not going to waste time with pleasantries or procedural debates. You've wasted enough time already, 36 days, to be exact. Johnson started to respond, but she held up a hand. You'll have plenty of time to respond. Right now, you're going to listen, because I'm going to present a timeline, just facts, public record, and then I'm going to ask you some very simple questions. Jordan looked like he might intervene, but Raskin was already shaking his head. Mr. Chairman, the witness has interrupted repeatedly. The gentle lady deserves her time without interruption. Grudgingly, the gentle lady may proceed. Crockett pulled out the first document. Behind her, a large monitor flickered to life. Her staff had prepared a presentation. Let's establish some facts. Earlier this year, 2 special elections were held for House seats, both in Florida, both Republicans. Let's see how those were handled. The monitor displayed a timeline, clean and devastating. February 28, 2025, Florida special elections. Jimmy Petronis wins FL 1. Randy Fine wins FL 6. March 1, 2025, the next day, 10:47 a.m., Florida Secretary of State certifies results. 2:15 p.m., Speaker Johnson announces both will be sworn in immediately. 4:30 p.m., pro forma session called. 4:45 p.m., both representatives sworn in by Speaker Johnson. Total time from election to oath, 19 hours. Crockett let that sit for a moment. 19 hours, election to oath, during a pro forma session, which Speaker Johnson just testified he doesn't use for swearing in members. But that's what happened. It's in the congressional record. Would you like me to read it? Johnson's face had gone slightly red. Those situations were different. I'm not finished. Her voice was steel now. Those situations were different, you said. You said they had urgent constituent matters, but you can't remember what they were. So, let's move on. She clicked to the next slide. September 23, 2025, Arizona special election. Adelita Grijalva wins AZ 7 with 69% of the vote. October 14, 2025, 3 weeks later, Arizona Secretary of State certifies results. Grijalva requests swearing-in date. October 15 to October 29, 2025, 36 days later, still not sworn in. Office assigned, but no staff authorized. No congressional email access. No voting rights, no constituent services available. 813,000 Arizonans without representation. The comparison appeared on split screen. On the left, a photo of Petronis and Fine being sworn in, smiling, American flags, Johnson administering the oath. On the right, a photo of Grijalva standing outside a congressional office alone, door closed behind her. 19 hours versus 36 days, Crockett said quietly. Both special elections, both certified by state officials, both constitutionally qualified. The only difference I can see, Speaker Johnson, is party affiliation. Would you like to explain what other differences exist? Johnson shifted in his chair. As I've explained. The precedent you violated your own precedent. Crockett cut in. You swore in Petronis and Fine during a pro forma session. You just testified that you follow Speaker Pelosi's precedent of waiting for full session. Which is it? Do you use pro forma sessions or don't you? The circumstances were different. What circumstances? Specifically, what was different about Representatives Petronis and Fine that required you to abandon your precedent and swear them in within 19 hours? Silence. Johnson opened his mouth, closed it. His lawyer leaned in, whispering. Johnson waved him off. There were constituent services that needed immediate attention. What services? I don't have those details in front of me. You don't recall, even though it was urgent enough to break your own precedent. Crockett pulled out another document. This is your press statement from March 1st. I'm going to read it. Quote, I am pleased to swear in Representatives Petronis and Fine during today's pro forma session. While we typically wait for full legislative session, their constituents deserve representation immediately. She looked up. Their constituents deserved representation immediately. What about Congresswoman-elect Grijalva's constituents? Don't the 813,000 Americans in Arizona's 7th District deserve representation? Or do only Republican constituents deserve immediate representation? The room erupted, Democrats applauding, Republicans shouting objections. Jordan gavelled for order. And in the gallery, slowly, deliberately, a group of people stood up, 7 members of Arizona's congressional delegation, all Democrats, rising in silent protest. Jordan noticed. The gallery will remain seated. Mr. Chairman, Crockett said calmly, those are members of Congress. They're not required to sit, and they're standing for their colleague who should be seated with us but isn't, because Speaker Johnson won't allow it. The Arizona delegation remained standing. Cameras caught every face. The optics were devastating, elected representatives standing in solidarity for another elected representative who couldn't serve. Crockett wasn't done. But let's talk about what really makes Representative-elect Grijalva's situation different. Let's talk about what happens the moment she's sworn in. She pulled out another document. The monitor changed to show House Resolution 847, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, currently subject to a discharge petition that requires 218 signatures to force a floor vote over the Speaker's objection. This petition has been gathering signatures for months. Do you know how many signatures it currently has, Speaker Johnson? Johnson didn't answer. His jaw was clenched. 217, Crockett said. It has 217 signatures, 212 Democrats and 5 Republicans. It needs one more, just one. And Congresswoman-elect Grijalva has publicly stated that the first thing she'll do when sworn in is sign this petition. She will be signature number 218. The room went completely silent. Which means, Crockett continued, the moment you swear her in, this bill comes to the House floor for a mandatory vote, whether you want it to or not, whether you bring it up or not. The discharge petition forces it, and America will get to vote on whether to release the FBI's investigation files on Jeffrey Epstein. She leaned forward slightly. That's quite a coincidence, don't you think? The petition needs one more signature. Grijalva wins her election. She says she'll sign it. And suddenly, for the first time in your tenure as Speaker, you can't find time to administer a 35-word oath. Johnson's face was red. Now, that is a conspiracy theory manufactured by Democrats who want to. Crockett pulled out another document. This is an email sent from your chief of staff to Republican leadership. It was leaked to several news outlets 3 days ago. Have you seen it? I don't discuss internal communications. Let me read it for you. Date, October 16, 2 days after Grijalva certification. Subject line, urgent, Grijalva timeline. Quote, Grijalva swearing in must be delayed until after Thanksgiving recess. If she's seated before then, discharge petition reaches 218 and Epstein vote is triggered. POTUS extremely concerned about timing. Need to buy time for alternative strategy. The hearing room exploded. Reporters shouting questions, Republicans yelling, point of order, Democrats demanding Johnson respond immediately. Jordan was gaveling frantically, but the chaos continued. In the gallery, people were on their feet. The Arizona delegation still standing, now with hands over hearts, a gesture of mourning for democracy. Crockett just sat calmly, waiting for order to be restored. She had more. When Jordan finally got control, he was sweating. The witness will have an opportunity to respond. No, Johnson said, standing up. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of, this email is taken completely out of context. My staff discusses political implications of every decision. That doesn't mean. What context, Crockett asked quietly, her voice cutting through his bluster, makes, must be delayed, and, POTUS extremely concerned, means something other than what it clearly says. Silence again. Johnson sat down slowly. Let me ask you directly, Speaker Johnson. Why doesn't President Trump want the Epstein files released? I can't speak for the president. Your chief of staff did. According to this email, the president is extremely concerned about a vote on transparency about files related to a convicted sex trafficker who had connections to powerful men, including the president himself. Why the concern? The president has said repeatedly he wants transparency through proper channels. The proper channel is a congressional vote. That's literally how our system works, unless you're afraid of what those files contain. Jordan tried to intervene. Congresswoman, you're speculating about motivations. Am I? Crockett held up the email. This is your staff's own words, not speculation, documentation. POTUS extremely concerned. Need to buy time. Delay until after Thanksgiving. What am I speculating about? I'm reading what your own people wrote. Johnson had no good answer. His legal team was frantically scribbling notes, passing them to him. He read one, crumpled it, dropped it. Crockett looked at her watch. I have 3 minutes left of my time, and I want to use them differently, because this isn't just about procedures or petitions. This is about real people, real Americans, real consequences. She looked at the witness table where another woman sat, someone who hadn't been introduced yet. Ms. Santos, would you please come forward? Maria Santos stood slowly. She was 54, dressed simply, clutching a photo frame. As she walked to the microphone, camera zoomed in on what she carried, a photo of a young woman, early 20s, beautiful smile. Jordan looked confused. I don't recall this witness being. She's a constituent of Arizona's 7th District, Crockett said. She has relevant testimony about what it means to have no representation. Mr. Chairman, will you allow an Arizona voter to speak about her experience? Jordan couldn't say no, not with cameras everywhere. The witness may proceed. Maria's hands were shaking as she adjusted the microphone. My name is Maria Santos. I live in Phoenix. Was supposed to be, represented by Congresswoman Grijalva, but she hasn't been allowed to serve yet. She took a breath, steadying herself. My daughter Sophia was 23 years old. She had a heart condition, a congenital defect, born with it. She needed regular monitoring, medication, sometimes procedures. She was on Medicaid. Her voice caught, but she continued. In August, her cardiologist said she needed surgery, emergency surgery. Her heart was failing. He sent the referral to her insurance company. They denied it. Said it wasn't medically necessary. Can you imagine? A cardiologist says you need heart surgery, and an insurance company says no. We appealed. They denied it again. We tried to get help. For 20 years, Congressman Raul Grijalva's office had helped people in our district with insurance problems. They knew how to fight these companies. They'd helped us before when Sophia had issues. But Congressman Grijalva had died in March. The office was closed, transitioning. Tears now, but she kept going. We tried calling other Arizona congressional offices. They said Sophia wasn't in their district. They couldn't help. We had no representative, nobody to call, nobody to fight for us. We filed another appeal on our own. It took 6 weeks going back and forth. The insurance company finally approved the surgery on September 20th. She couldn't speak, just held up the photo, the young woman with the beautiful smile who would never smile again. Sophia died on September 18th, 2 days before the approval came. She was waiting for a surgery, waiting for someone to fight for her, but we had no representative. The hearing room was dead silent except for Maria's quiet crying and the sound of people in the gallery weeping with her. 5 days later, Maria continued, voice shaking, we had a special election. 69% of us voted for Adelita Grijalva. We thought, finally, we'll have someone again, someone to call when things go wrong, someone to fight for us. She looked directly at Johnson, and her voice became stronger. But you won't swear her in. For 36 days, you've denied us representation. My daughter is dead. She died because we had nobody to call, nobody to fight the insurance company, nobody to help us. She set the photo down on Johnson's table, right in front of him. Sophia's face, frozen in time, looking up at him. How many more daughters have to die before you let Arizona have their congresswoman? Maria sat down. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Johnson looked at the photo, looked away, looked back. Something crossed his face, shame, perhaps, or just the calculation of how this looked on camera. Ms. Santos, I am deeply sorry for your loss. Don't. Grijalva exploded, her first words of the hearing, cutting through like a knife. Don't you dare. Don't you dare tell this woman you're sorry while you continue to block me from helping people like her daughter. She stood up, walked to where Johnson sat, stood right in front of him. If I'd been sworn in on October 15th, when I should have been, when the Constitution says I should have been, when Arizona law says I should have been, when basic democratic principles say I should have been, I would have had staff. I would have had resources. I could have helped Sophia Santos. I know, because my father did it hundreds of times. That's what we do. We intervene with federal agencies. We fight insurance companies. We call in favors. We make noise. We save lives. Her voice broke. But I couldn't help her, because you wouldn't let me. Because some petition frightened you more than this woman's daughter's life mattered to you. She sat back down, trembling with fury and grief. Nobody spoke. 30 seconds of complete silence. Jordan didn't even try to gavel. He just sat there, looking at his hands. Finally, Crockett spoke again. I'd like to call one more witness, Professor Lawrence Tribe from Harvard Law School. Professor Tribe, you've studied constitutional law for 50 years. You've argued before the Supreme Court 36 times. You wrote the textbook that most lawyers, including Speaker Johnson, studied in law school. An elderly man with white hair stood up in the gallery. He didn't wait for permission, just walked to the witness table and sat down. Professor Tribe, Crockett asked, is the Speaker's refusal to swear in a duly elected representative constitutional? Tribe's voice was clear and firm. No. Unequivocally, no. The Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate its own procedures, but that power is not absolute. It cannot be used to deny representation to American citizens who have elected their representative in a free and fair election. But the Speaker claims he's following precedent. Precedent doesn't override constitutional rights. And even accepting his precedent argument, which I don't, he violated his own precedent by swearing in Representatives Petraeus and Fine within 19 hours. You cannot selectively apply precedent based on party affiliation. That's not precedent. That's discrimination. Tribe leaned forward, and his next words would be quoted in every news outlet in America. Let me be very clear about what's happening here. This is voter disenfranchisement. This is taxation without representation, the very thing our founders fought a revolution to prevent. 813,000 Americans are being governed without their consent, taxed without representation, denied their constitutional right to have a voice in their government. He paused. That is tyranny, not metaphorical tyranny, actual tyranny. When one person can block the will of 813,000 voters because he doesn't like how their representative might vote, democracy is over. The word hung in the air, tyranny. Jordan looked like he wanted to object but couldn't. How do you object to Harvard's most famous constitutional scholar calling out constitutional violations? Republicans on the committee were squirming. Several looked genuinely uncomfortable. They knew this was wrong but couldn't say it without breaking with their party. Tribe continued. The Speaker has a ministerial duty, not discretionary power, to administer the oath to elected representatives. He's treating it like a discretionary power, like something he can withhold for political leverage. That's unconstitutional. And if we allow it to stand, we've established that elections don't matter. Only the Speaker's political calculations matter. He looked at the cameras. Every American watching this should understand, if this stands, your vote doesn't matter. Your representative can be blocked from serving if the Speaker disagrees with how they'll vote. That's not democracy. That's authoritarianism. Crockett let that sink in. Thank you, Professor Tribe. I have one more minute of my time. Speaker Johnson, I'm going to give you one last chance to explain this. She closed the portfolio, put both hands flat on the desk. Every camera in the room focused on her face. You swore in 2 Republicans in 19 hours. You've blocked 1 Democrat for 36 days. You claim it's about precedent, but you violated your own precedent. You claim it's about ceremony, but you've denied her ceremony for over a month. You claim it's not about the Epstein petition, but your own staff's email says otherwise. The room was absolutely silent. 22 million people watching, holding their breath. So, here's my question, very simple. I want you to think carefully before answering, because millions of people are listening. Federal judges are watching, and history will remember your answer. She paused. Why is Adelita Grijalva's vote the one you fear? The silence began. 3 seconds. Johnson opened his mouth. Nothing came out. 5 seconds. His face was red, sweating, eyes darting to his lawyers, to Jordan, to the cameras, back to Crockett. 8 seconds. He picked up his water glass, hand shaking, put it down without drinking. 10 seconds. Someone in the gallery coughed. The sound echoed like a gunshot. 12 seconds. A reporter's camera shutter clicked, then another, then a dozen, like a firing squad. 15 seconds. Johnson started to speak. This characterization, you're misrepresenting. The words died, because what could he say? Any answer would be a confession. I'm not afraid of any vote. Then swear her in. Crockett's voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. Right now. We're on the record. There are cameras. Administer the oath. Let her sign whatever petition she wants. Let democracy work. 18 seconds total. I will swear her in when the House returns to full legislative. Why? What happens between now and then that changes anything? Why can't you do it today? Silence. He had no answer. Then someone in the gallery, a man in his 60s, Arizona resident, veteran, called out, "Swear her in." Another voice, a woman, "Let her serve." Then it started, "Swear her in. Swear her in. Swear her in." The chant built, started with a dozen voices, then 50, then 100. People in the gallery, people in the hall outside, voices carrying through the doors. Jordan was gaveling frantically, "Order! I will clear this chamber." But the chant continued, and then something unprecedented happened. Grijalva stood up, looked at Crockett, nodded once. Crockett stood. Then every Democrat on the committee stood. Then the Democratic staffers. Then Democrats in the gallery. And they all walked out, not running, not shouting, just walking calmly together, leaving Republicans sitting alone in the chamber with their speaker who couldn't explain why he was denying representation to 813,000 Americans. As they reached the door, Crockett turned back, looked at the cameras, not at Johnson. "We'll be on the House floor tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We're filing a resolution to compel the Speaker to administer the oath within 24 hours or be held in contempt of Congress. And we'll see how many Republicans are willing to vote that denying Americans their representation is acceptable." She walked out. The door closed behind her. Jordan sat at his desk, gavel in hand, presiding over a room half empty and a hearing that had just exposed a constitutional crisis on live television. Johnson sat at the witness table, staring at the photo of Sofia Santos that Maria had left in front of him, a 23-year-old woman who died waiting for someone to fight for her, all because one man wouldn't administer a 35-word oath. Within an hour, #18 seconds was trending worldwide. The clip of Crockett asking, "Why is Adelita Grijalva's vote the one you fear?" And Johnson's 18 seconds of fumbling, unable to answer, hit 25 million views in 3 hours. Social media erupted. #SwearHerin trended for 4 straight days. Thousands voiced representation for the disenfranchised Arizonans. "Why do you fear her vote?" became the question asked of every Republican. Johnson tried damage control, posting at 9:47 p.m., "I will swear in Congresswoman-elect Grijalva at the next available legislative session. These political games by Democrats don't serve Arizona or America. I remain committed to proper procedure and constitutional principles." The ratio was devastating, 50-1 negative responses. What political games? Just swear her in. 19 hours for Republicans, 36 days for a Democrat. Explain. You had 18 seconds to answer. You had nothing. Why do you fear her vote? Republicans started breaking ranks. Representative Roy, Republican Texas, "This has gone on too long. Swear her in. Follow the precedent you set in March." Representative Thomas Massey, Republican Kentucky, "The 218th signature shouldn't be blocked. Americans deserve transparency on Epstein. Swear her in and let the vote happen." Representative Nancy Mace, RSC, "I don't understand the delay." She won. She was certified. Give her the oath. Even some Trump allies were quiet, not defending, just quiet, because there was no good defense. That night, at 11:34 p.m., Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays filed an emergency motion in federal court, Mays v. Johnson. Emergency petition for writ of mandamus. Request, court order compelling Speaker Johnson to administer oath of office to Adelita Grijalva within 24 hours. Legal basis, constitutional right to representation, equal protection clause, established precedent violated. The motion included, timeline showing 19-hour swearing in for Republicans versus 36-day delay for Democrat, congressional record showing precedent, expert declarations from 3 constitutional scholars, including tribe, testimony from Maria Santos about harm to constituents, the leaked email about delaying for political reasons. Judge and Williams, an Obama appointee, former civil rights attorney known for being tough on government overreach, scheduled an emergency hearing for 2 p.m. the next day and ordered, Speaker Johnson will appear personally and explain his refusal to administer the oath to Representative-elect Grijalva. The court had entered the political arena. This was no longer just politics. It was a constitutional crisis, with a federal judge demanding answers. The federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., was packed by noon. Every major outlet had cameras outside. Constitutional scholars gave interviews on the steps. Protesters held signs, 813,000 without representation, and, democracy delayed is democracy denied. At 1:55 p.m., Speaker Johnson arrived with a team of 6 lawyers. At 1:57 p.m., Adelita Grijalva arrived with Chris Mays and Jasmine Crockett, not as a lawyer, but as moral support. At 2 p.m. exactly, Judge Williams entered. She was 58, black, gray hair in a tight bun, expression giving away nothing. Be seated. This emergency hearing is called to order in the matter of Mays versus Johnson. Let me say at the outset, I have read every brief filed. I watched yesterday's congressional hearing, and I am deeply troubled by what I've seen. She looked at Johnson's legal team. Counselors, I'm going to give you a chance to explain your client's actions. But understand, I'm not interested in political arguments. I'm interested in constitutional law. Why has your client refused to swear in a duly elected representative for 36 days? Johnson's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, with respect, this court lacks jurisdiction over internal House procedures. The Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate its own. I've read the Constitution, Counselor. I've also read Reynolds versus Sims, which established that diluting voting power is unconstitutional. I've read Baker versus Carr, which established that federal courts can hear cases involving representative government. I've read Powell v. McCormick, which held that the House cannot exclude a duly elected member who meets constitutional qualifications. She leaned forward. So, please don't lecture me about jurisdiction. Your client is denying representation to 813,000 Americans. That's not an internal House procedure. That's a constitutional violation. Now explain why it's not. The lawyer stumbled. Your Honor, the Speaker is following established precedent. What precedent? He swore in 2 Republicans in 19 hours earlier this year, during a pro forma session. The same type of session he now claims he cannot use. That's not precedent. That's selective application based on party affiliation. The lawyer tried another approach. The ongoing government shutdown makes a formal ceremony impossible. The oath is 35 words long and requires no ceremony. It can be administered anywhere, anytime. Try again. The Speaker believes that representatives-elect deserve the dignity of. Judge Williams's voice was ice. Stop. Just stop. We all watched yesterday's hearing. We all heard the leaked email from the Speaker's Chief of Staff about delaying until after Thanksgiving to avoid triggering the Epstein files vote. We all heard 18 seconds of silence when asked why he fears this particular representative's vote. She looked past the lawyers, directly at Johnson. Speaker Johnson, I'm going to ask you directly, and you're under oath in my courtroom. Why have you refused to swear in Representative-elect Grijalva? Johnson stood. Your Honor, I have followed the same procedures. You haven't. You swore in Republicans in 19 hours. You've delayed a Democrat for 36 days. That's not the same procedure. That's discrimination based on party affiliation, which violates the Equal Protection Clause. Your Honor, the circumstances were different. What circumstances? Representatives Petranis and Fine had urgent constituent matters. What matters? I don't have those details. You don't recall, how convenient. But you remember that they were urgent enough to break your own stated precedent. Johnson's face was red. His lawyers were frantically whispering. He waved them off. Your Honor, with respect, the political composition of Congress affects the balance of power, and the timing of when members are seated can have. Stop. Judge Williams's voice was sharp. Did you just admit that you're delaying her swearing in because of political concerns about congressional balance of power? Johnson realized his mistake. No, I'm simply saying. You're saying that you believe you have discretion over when to seat elected representatives based on political calculations. That's exactly what Powell v. McCormick said you cannot do. The House cannot exclude a member who meets constitutional qualifications. Ms. Grijalva meets all qualifications. She was elected. She was certified. You have no legitimate reason to delay. She picked up a document. This is your own press release from March 1st, when you swore in Representatives Petranis and Fine. Quote, their constituents deserve representation immediately. End quote. Do Ms. Grijalva's constituents not deserve the same? Silence. Do the 813,000 Americans in Arizona's 7th District not have the same rights as Floridians? Or do rights depend on party affiliation in your view? Your Honor, I resent the implication. I don't care what you resent, Speaker Johnson. I care about the Constitution, and you're violating it. She set down her papers. Here's what I see, a duly elected representative, certified by state officials, constitutionally qualified in every way, and a speaker who has the ministerial duty, not discretionary power, but duty, to administer a 35-word oath. You've done it for others in 19 hours. You've delayed this representative for 36 days. The only difference I can discern is party affiliation and political calculation. Under Baker v. Carr and Reynolds v. Sims, this court has jurisdiction when voting rights and representative government are violated. Under Powell v. McCormick, the House cannot exclude qualified members. Under the Equal Protection Clause, you cannot treat representatives differently based on political affiliation. She looked at her notes one final time. I find that Speaker Johnson has violated the constitutional rights of both Representative-elect Grijalva and the 813,000 citizens she represents. I'm issuing an order. Speaker Johnson will administer the oath of office to Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva within 24 hours of this ruling, or be held in contempt of court. Johnson's lawyers erupted. Your Honor, the separation of powers is not absolute. The judiciary has the power and duty to remedy constitutional violations. This is a constitutional violation. The order stands. She stood. 24 hours, Speaker Johnson, oath administered by 2 p.m. tomorrow, or contempt charges will be filed. This hearing is adjourned. She left the bench. The courtroom exploded with noise, reporters shouting questions, lawyers arguing with each other, Grijalva crying with relief. Outside on the courthouse steps, Chris Mays addressed cameras. Today, a federal judge did what Speaker Johnson refused to do, uphold the Constitution. Arizona will have its representative. Democracy will be restored. Crockett stood beside Grijalva, arm around her shoulders. A reporter shouted, Congresswoman Crockett, how does it feel to win? Crockett shook her head. We didn't win. The Constitution won. It took 36 days, a federal lawsuit, and a judge's order to enforce what should have happened automatically. That's not a win. That's a failure of our system that had to be corrected. But she smiled slightly. But yeah, it feels pretty good. At 1:47 p.m. the next day, 13 minutes before the court deadline, the House was called into pro forma session. Speaker Mike Johnson walked to the floor, face expressionless, angry. This wasn't how he wanted this to go, but a federal judge had given him no choice. Adelita Grijalva stood in the well of the House. She'd waited 37 days for this moment. No ceremony, no celebration, no family photos or congratulations, just the bare constitutional minimum. Johnson raised his right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter? So help you God. I do, Grijalva said. Her voice was strong, clear, certain. Johnson walked away without another word, no handshake, no welcome, just turned and left the chamber. Grijalva stood there for a moment, taking it in. She was Congresswoman Grijalva now, finally, 37 days late, but finally. She walked directly to the clerk's desk. I'd like to sign the discharge petition for House Resolution 847, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The clerk handed her the petition. Grijalva signed her name, signature number 218. The petition was complete. The vote would happen, whether Johnson wanted it or not. Democratic members who'd been waiting erupted in applause. Republicans sat silently, knowing what was coming. Within 2 legislative days, the bill would come to the floor. Johnson couldn't block it, couldn't delay it. The discharge petition forced a vote. 3 days later, the House floor debate on the Epstein Files Transparency Act was fierce. Republicans argued privacy concerns, potential harm to innocent people mentioned in files, security risks, investigative integrity. Democrats argued transparency, public right to know, accountability for powerful people, justice for victims. The American people watched, waiting. The vote was called, 232 to 201. The bill passed. Every Democrat voted yes. 20 Republicans voted yes. 201 Republicans voted no. The bill went to the Senate, passed there too, barely, with 5 Republicans joining all Democrats. Trump had to sign it or face a veto override. He signed it, posting, "I've ordered total transparency. Whatever is in these files, America will see, but don't believe the lies the fake news will spin. I've done nothing wrong. This is a witch hunt that will backfire on the radical left." The files would be released within 90 days. 1 month after finally being sworn in, Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva held her first town hall in Phoenix. The community center was packed, 800 people showed up, far more than expected. They had to open overflow rooms with video feeds. Grijalva stood at the podium, looking out at her constituents, the people she'd fought 37 days to serve. "I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for electing me. Thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't serve. Thank you for not giving up on democracy." She paused. "I've been in office for 1 month. In that time, my office has helped 47 constituents with federal issues. We've intervened in 3 insurance denials, and got all 3 approved. We've helped veterans get benefits. We've helped families navigate immigration paperwork. We've helped small businesses understand federal regulations. This is what representation looks like. This is what you were denied for 37 days. And I'm sorry it took so long." In the third row, Maria Santos stood up. "You have nothing to apologize for. You fought to serve us. Thank you." They embraced, tears from both. The room gave them a standing ovation. Grijalva wiped her eyes. "Maria, I made you a promise. No more families will lose what you lost. I've introduced legislation requiring emergency procedures for insurance appeals when someone's life is at risk. We're calling it Sophia's Law, and I am going to fight until it passes." More applause, more tears. Someone asked, "What about the Epstein files?" Grijalva nodded. "They'll be released in about 2 months. I don't know what they'll contain, but I know America deserves truth. Victims deserve justice. And power needs accountability. That's why I signed that petition the moment I was sworn in, not because I knew what was in the files, but because transparency is how democracy survives." After the town hall, reporters asked her about Speaker Johnson. "I have no personal animosity toward him, but what he did was wrong, unconstitutional. And I hope voters remember that he was willing to deny 813,000 Americans their representation to protect political interests. Do you think he'll face consequences? That's up to voters. That's how democracy works. He made his choices. They'll make theirs." 2 years later, October 14th became Representation Day in Arizona, commemorating the day Grijalva's victory was certified, even though she wouldn't be allowed to serve for another 37 days. The state capitol hosted an event. Speakers included Grijalva, now running for re-election with a 71% approval rating, Crockett, now exploring a Senate run, Maria Santos, whose organization Sophia's Voice had helped 127 families fight insurance denials in its first year. Professor Tribe gave a lecture, The Constitutional Crisis of 2025, when one man tried to block democracy. "What we witnessed," he said, "was a test of our system. One person, one single person, tried to override the will of 813,000 voters. He delayed. He deflected. He defended the indefensible. But the system worked, not perfectly, not quickly, not without a fight, but it worked. Congress held hearings. Courts intervened. The press reported. Citizens protested. And democracy was restored. Remember that when you feel like the system is broken, and sometimes it is. Remember that it can also be fixed, but only if people fight for it. The documentary aired on PBS that night, 37 days, when democracy was delayed but not denied. The most powerful moment was Maria Santos at Sophia's grave. 2 years ago, I was angry, so angry at everyone, at the system, at Speaker Johnson, for making my daughter's death meaningless. She touched the gravestone. But you know what? Your death wasn't meaningless, baby, because your story changed things. Sophia's law passed. Now families have emergency procedures. Now they have someone to call. Now other daughters are alive because of what happened to you. I wish you were here, but your voice was heard. Just not how I wanted. The film showed Grijalva in her congressional office, walls covered with thank you notes from constituents she'd helped. That first month, when I could finally serve, that's when I understood what they'd stolen. Not from me, from every person who needed help during those 37 days. But here's what Johnson didn't count on: we didn't just sign the petition. We forced the vote. We released the files. And democracy survived. The Epstein files had been released 4 months earlier, 2,947 pages of investigative materials, names, allegations, evidence. Congressional hearings continued. Multiple investigations opened. The story was far from over, but America had seen what its government investigated. The transparency that Johnson tried to prevent had happened. Crockett gave the final interview, filmed in her congressional office. People ask me why I pushed so hard, why I made it confrontational with Johnson. And I say, because 813,000 Americans had no voice. Because one man thought he could override democracy. Because constitutional violations need to be called what they are, violations. I'm not a hero. I just asked questions, presented evidence, made him face what he was doing. The real heroes are Maria Santos, who told her daughter's story even though it hurt, Adelita Grijalva, who fought for 37 days to serve people she'd never met, the judge who ordered democracy restored, the voters who refused to accept being silenced. She looked directly at the camera. Democracy isn't automatic. It's not guaranteed. Every single day, you have to fight for it. And when power tries to take it away, even with a Bible, even with procedural excuses, even with political calculations, you stand up and say, no. Not here. Not in America. That's the lesson. That's what we learned. That's what we have to remember. The screen faded to black. Then text appeared. Mike Johnson remained Speaker through the end of the term but faced a primary challenge in 2026. His approval rating never recovered from the 37-day delay. Adelita Grijalva was re-elected with 74% of the vote. Sophia's law passed both chambers with bipartisan support and was signed into law. Jasmine Crockett continues serving Texas's 30th district. She declined offers to run for higher office. I'm not finished with the work here. Maria Santos's organization, Sophia's Voice, has helped over 400 families navigate insurance denials. Only one has lost their appeal since the organization began. Federal courts continue to cite Mays v. Johnson as precedent establishing judicial authority to compel constitutional compliance in congressional procedures. The Epstein files remain subject to ongoing investigation, with multiple criminal referrals, civil lawsuits, and congressional hearings continuing. 813,000 Arizonans have representation. Democracy was tested. Democracy survived, but only because people fought for it.